So exciting stuff, right?
I like it. I got into it.
So,
I would be one that picked up Bart Ehrman's book. Yeah, absolutely.
Our authors tell us that no doubt this is informative and likely interesting to some, but clearly its explanation of textual criticism can hardly explain the success of misquoting Jesus, right? That it has today in popular culture, right? I mean, some people would really, get into this stuff, but that doesn't mean, everybody would, and especially not as many people who bought the book.
Made it a bestseller, yeah.
So instead, what happened? Well, they're suggesting that the skeptical conclusions that Ehrman draws from his study have likely generated the attention that the book got, right?
I mean, there's a reason that there's a lot of skeptical books that come out during Christmas and Easter. I mean, there's a reason that they're put out and lauded as the big revelation.
That's right. What really happened?
This is the truth that Jesus went to India and he became the Dalai Lama. Something along those lines.
So here's an example. Ehrman writes, if he, that is God, really wanted people to have his actual words, surely, so this is a really skeptical type of thing, right? If he really wanted people to have his actual words, surely he would have miraculously preserved those words, just as he had miraculously inspired them in the first place.
Right.
So given the circumstances that he didn't preserve the words, the conclusion seemed inescapable to me, Ehrman tells us, that he hadn't gone to the trouble of inspiring them, right? So if we don't have a perfect, miraculously preserved written words, then he's suggesting that we don't have, that God didn't inspire, right? Because God would have, made sure that what he wanted us to have would have been perfect, would have been miraculously preserved, and we'd literally have exactly what Peter or Paul or John wrote, right?
Right.
In terms of, their own handwriting and everything else, or their scribe's handwriting and that sort of thing.
If you tried to tear this parchment, it wouldn't be able to tear or burn it.
That's right.
If you tried to copy it yourself,
you wouldn't let you copy it.
Right. You'd stop at for God hated, and you couldn't quite draw it because God knew, and he would stop your hand.
Yeah. So nobody could really copy something different.
Right.
If you were to copy it, you'd copy it exactly the way it was, right? And that sort of thing. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Again, the fundamentalism of Bart Ehrman is on display here.
Yeah.
Or by just saying, by what standard do you have that you hold God to this? If I were God, okay, well, that's something that Dawkins would say, oh, if I was God, I wouldn't have designed it this way. Something there are trade-offs to that type of design. And so for Ehrman, here's a standard that he's created that he's just kind of saying, okay, here's what I think the logical conclusions of what God would do are.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, unless if you're coming from an understanding of who God is, then how do you know what this unknown God is?
Yeah. So the argument can be put something like this, right? If the scriptures are inspired, then they would have been miraculously preserved. They weren't miraculously preserved, therefore they weren't inspired, right? And so that's kind of the form that this particular argument, it's a deductive argument. The form is called modus tollens, actually. And so it's kind of interesting here in terms of how this is argued. Right. Now, so it's a valid argument, but we want to know, is it sound? Is it true?
Right. Do we agree with the premise?
Yeah.
So Ehrman's work has grabbed the attention of multitudes because the implications are obvious. If he's correct, we have no reason to have the confidence that what we are reading is what the original authors really wrote, and the traditional Christian beliefs in the inspiration of Scripture is undermined. So we just came up with all these things through a general course of history, and we're just keep adding to them in the hopes that no one notices. We don't even have a man behind the curtain.
Yeah.
So we're just.
It's not even a curtain.
Yeah, it's just a smoke screen, nothing else. So in the rest of this chapter, you will see that Ehrman's interpretation is born out of an unduly skeptical approach, and one that I think the authors do a pretty decent job in the space provided. With some quotes from Ehrman himself that show that he has pretty much an impossible bar for him that he's established to even consider taking seriously that what we have is the accurate originals, the original words that were provided in the original texts. And so this stands in direct conflict with many other scholars in the field, and even some of his own conclusions.
Yeah, so, this is his position, right? And what they're suggesting here is, well, lots of people disagree. And not only that, in terms of some of his writings, he seems to be contradicting himself, right? Or conflicting with what he said earlier and that sort of thing, right?
And even when you have scholars that we would agree with too point to something and say, well, we probably should put a note in our study Bibles for this and say this passage or this verse was most likely not in the original. And so what that should also do is inform the person reading it that there's more reading to be done about that. Well, then why is it here? How did it get here? Where did it go? Depending on where it's at. And so you have those things like the Communiohanium or the longer ending of Mark is one, and the Pericope adultery, that's another one, or the I think it's 1 John. There are three of them that testify in heaven.
Yeah, they're gonna talk about these here. Yeah.
And so there are ones that we would freely admit, and unlike
and the freely admit is important, right?
Yeah.
There's no hidden agenda, right? We know what the issues and the problems
it's been
are.
in our Bibles for a while.
Right.
Too.
They make notes so that hey, this may not be exactly, it may be, read like this.
Right.
So there's various, and so you can, consider it yourself. You can, as you said, study it yourself and come to your own conclusions.
And so one of the things that Bart Ehrman has done is he's brought to light this hidden agenda that not even the preachers are talking about, but that's more against the preachers than it is against biblical scholarship and people who continue to believe even after finding out about this. And there's importance to those things, and the very fact that we can identify those things also helps us to have confidence that we can identify what the original manuscripts have said as well. So Ehrman himself admits that we have more manuscripts of the Bible than any other piece of literature from antiquity, but nonetheless denies its reliability. And so you have things like the Quran and the Uthman revision. And so, in the modern Quranic standard for the English, or if you can read the Arabic, there's usually only one, maybe two versions that you can get. You don't have the C note, A2 for this not being in the original, or an explanation for why this is here when it was probably over here is not founded within the scope of that type of literature. And so even comparing works of antiquity that were around the same time as the New Testament, we are overgorged with manuscripts, and that's a good thing. But then that also multiplies those evil variants, which are actually good as well.
Right.